Hello, everyone. We are so excited to be here. We'll give some people a another minute or so to join, but I will actually start off by um, thanking everyone for coming today and just talking really quickly about rules of engagement. There is a Q&A panel to the left-hand side. Please use it. This is definitely a webinar where we want to have like a fun conversation. So no need to hold your questions until the end. Feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we will try to take them as we go along. Absolutely. So I still see a couple more people coming in. Yep. We'll go ahead and get started actually. So welcome everyone. Today we are having a webinar talking about moving from hands-on to high automation. I'm Ariel Kilroy. I am the CEO of Dado. We are an employee experience management tool. And I'm here today to talk with Lauren Hauser. She is an L&D program manager over at Udemy. She is passionate about creating cultures of belonging through engaging learning journeys at organizations of all sizes. And at Udemy, she leads both the onboarding talent processes as well as the internal mentoring programs that are really designed to inspire connection and share the power of Udemy's culture. I will personally say that watching the journey and the impact that Lauren has had over the past nearly year, actually, at this point, has been really inspiring. And I've been wanting to bring her expertise and her experience to a larger group for quite some time. So I'm really excited to be here today with her. So I'm actually going to just jump right in and start off with the first question. So you've been at Udemy just over a year, and obviously we're here today to talk about how onboarding has evolved during that time. Can you describe how the onboarding experience at Udemy was when you started?
Yeah, definitely. And just wanted to say hi and thanks for having me. And I'm excited to share more about our experiences at Udemy and also really curious to hear more from all of you if you have questions or other ideas that have worked really well in your onboarding processes. Very open to hearing more. But just to start off, yeah, when I came on board at Udemy, we were ramping really quickly across our global offices. And, one of the core things that my predecessor really set the tone for was that the new hire experience being, paramount to bring it to building a strong learning organization from day one, and also providing new hires with really compelling live orientations, as well as self-directed learning with our learning tools here at Udemy. But we were also a scaling business, and with scale, there was inherent challenges of just navigating a lot of manual tasks, liaisoning with a lot of different team members. For those of you who are familiar with onboarding, there's a lot of stakeholder communications, as well as with all of our managers and recruiters. And there was a lot of repetitive manual tasks that we were doing for every single cohort. And there was also, I noticed in my first few months, just a limited transparency around what was communicated to new hires from all the different teams as well. And then also from the new hire side, having an understanding of what was really, what tasks were being completed from a holistic standpoint. And so, as you can imagine, it was a big job in those first few months, and it really took up a lot of time. And that type of volume was pretty time intensive for myself in that role, and also for our stakeholders. So that was a little bit about where we really started.
That's great. I suspect a lot of people can relate to that time intensity and that manual repetitive tasks. So just ask a follow-up question. How do you feel like this felt for your new hires and for your hiring managers?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, We use Culture Amp as a survey tool, and we really gather feedback as much as we can. We say feedback is fuel internally at Udemy, and that's really important to us. And new hires were sharing that receiving communications from a lot of different places sometimes felt confusing, desiring more of a one-stop shop for where to get all the information they needed leading up to day one. I think generally for recruiters, there was just a lot of back and forth trying to collect certain information from new hires and trying to coordinate that with our IT teams, things like that. So, uh, generally, I think the feedback we really got was just wanting more streamlined experience for people, both internally and for the stakeholders, so they weren't having to track so many tasks or incoming administrative needs. So yeah, those were some of the things that came out in our feedback.
Great. That's great. And a reminder for the new people who are joining, feel free to drop any questions you have along the way, right in the Q&A. No need to hold them to the end. We really want to make this very interactive. So please feel empowered. So one of the things that or one of the milestones you hit on your journey, right, was figuring out to actually look for a tool, right?
Yeah.
In product world, we all talk about recognizing you have a problem and trying to create a solution yourself, and then realizing you would want to go purchase a tool. So you definitely hit that milestone. We're here today talking. So what actually made you what did you actually consider as part of your search when you went out and tried to look for a solution?
Yeah, definitely. Well, when I came into the role, my predecessor had started some initial conversations around looking for a tool in the anticipation of a larger growth year. And so I felt really grateful to have gotten some of her initial notes and ideas as she was starting to think through some of these questions. And we knew that when we were starting that initial phase of looking for a tool, that the core things of reducing the number of manual tasks was really critical for our success. And also implementing a technology system for our onboarding stakeholders to just increase the efficiencies internally and reduce the internal hours that were being spent on onboarding. And then obviously providing those new hires with some sort of checklist that felt really important to us. So as we were deciding to look for a tool, we really sat down and really envisioned what are the things that would make this program even stronger, especially as we scale. And in the discovery process, we also spent a good amount of time working with some of our other team members on the people team to identify core questions that we really wanted to ask potential tools and providers as we went through the vendor discovery process. So that was a really important part for us too, as we were starting to think about this. What are the core questions that we need to be asking when we start to do the discovery pieces?
So I'm going to anticipate someone's question and say, do you have an example of one of those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. We made a lot of evaluation criteria questions, to be honest. I think like also understanding the business itself, understanding, their philosophy, their values, why they were choosing to create their own software tool, and why they felt it was important that it existed. It was also really understanding, the accessibility of the tool. Is the tool built with best practices and usability to maximize ease of use for the admins? Could we really look or use a sandbox to understand, the accessibility of it as an admin, something that I would use. If we also asked people if they had examples from other providers of their best practices in using the tool. And then also really thinking about questions around the user experience as well, and really understanding questions around the user experience. So we got into a lot of detail in some ways, but that really helped us get a more holistic understanding of which providers we wanted to go with.
Great. That's great. So I know that Udemy has a really thorough procurement process. Um,
Hmm.
so how did you actually approach building a business case and getting internal buy-in?
Yeah, definitely. Upon reflection from our experience internally, I think one thing that was really helpful for us was that, and made this project particularly successful to move through the process, was that we had set an internal people team OKR specific to identifying systems that would allow us to scale internally as we grew. So there was already a mandate to really invest and continue the process, which was really helpful. And it still took a long time to do it. So, I think when we started the process, it still took us, almost 9 months to complete the entire discovery phase, going through different tools, moving it through procurement, ensuring leadership had buy-in on it. And each of those steps definitely took a lot of momentum building and, continuing to talk to the right people. Um, but I think the things that really helped drive it was we really outlined what we wanted those metrics of success to really look like for the project. And then it was also really important for me to bring the stakeholders along in the process of looking at demos, talking directly. We talked directly to Ariel quite a bit as well and brought different stakeholders into the process itself so they could also see, how would something like this impact their roles directly. And so talking with people ops and IT and some recruiters, and then bringing our leaders in as well to identify, we've gone through this process. Here's what we looked at, and this is the direction that we want to head. And so it was definitely a lot of steps, and it was my first time doing something like this too. So it was a learning curve for me as well. But it was also really exciting to see all the pieces moving ahead, and I think we learned some really important lessons.
That's great. That's great. So, I think you made some really good points there that that you about aligning your stakeholders and really helping them understand how you're going to advance the business, about showing the impact you're going to being able to have, and also bringing, of course, those actual measurable KPIs. You mentioned that this was a long learning process for you. Knowing what you know now, would you say that it was worth it?
Absolutely. One of the things that this is just a small difference that I would say between last year and where we're at now. Implementing the tool obviously took another, sprint of work around this particular project. But now that we've had all these things implemented, we've designed our experiences within data, everything is just about tweaking things at this point. So we're able to look at data in the tool to say, okay, we're not seeing, task completion on this particular task. Do we want to change where it lives in the experience, or do we want to change the wording? Small little tweaks like that, but the amount of time that we're spending on, the pre-boarding phases and the initial onboarding phases, communications, calendaring, all these things are just pretty much eliminated. And so, it's an interesting thing to just realize how little I'm thinking about those pieces like I was a year ago. And now it's allowing, myself and our team to just free up more time to really think about some of the core experience elements of onboarding that we wanted to tackle, right? So thinking more about our learning objectives and outcomes for new hires, being able to redesign live content to stay in the flow of the changes happening internally at Udemy, thinking more creatively about what the experience might look like to make it stronger for our global hires in different places. So it's really allowing us, I think, to up level the entire program in a way that would have been much more difficult if I would have been still doing a lot of these admin functions with the rest of the team. So, I've just seen a huge difference in a year in all of that.
Great. That's great. Um, so I mean, I know from others in your role, I obviously speak to a lot of people who are in your role, that this change management, moving from this hands-on to the automation approach can be pretty intimidating, actually. You were able to work across the organization to not only get everyone aligned on this process of switching, but actually get them really excited. Can you talk a little bit about what you did to actually manage the change management element of implementing a
Yeah.
technology?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk a lot about change management internally, and most organizations do, right? It's such an important piece. And it can go really well or it could be challenging. I think my belief is really that bringing people along in the process is really critical to showing how something can impact them directly. So, I think from my experience, it was less about, going through the entire discovery process, on our own, or really making decisions and then telling people what was happening, but really bringing people in at critical points so that they could feel invested in the project and why it would have impact. And then what will happen is they then also become champions of the work, right? So that was really helpful to see our stakeholder teams also really championing the tool with their managers and leaders, right? In IT or people ops, recruitment ops, things like that. So I think that was a real win for us in terms of moving the change forward. And I think that partnership with key stakeholders and really thinking about that first in the process helped me also ask different types of questions that I might not have asked in really building this project and making it stronger. So I think bringing in that expertise, making sure that people are feeling invested in the project, was really important. And then I think also there was a phase two where we were still gathering input also from leaders on what they were hoping to see, as we rolled out new tools like this. So I think generally as human beings, we operate with a lot of self-interest in mind. And so when people feel invested in something that will make an impact in their roles and making sure that that was the front and center, it, I think that gave us the buy-in we needed for the changes. And so by the time the actual change happened, everybody was excited and ready for it.
That's great. Again, please put any questions you might have in the Q&A. We would love, uh, love to have some some audience questions. Um, so, um, so what advice would you give others who are interested in trying to do a project like a big, change management tech project like this?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Yeah, first and foremost, figuring out who's gonna be on your team, who's your squad for the project. Making sure you have the right people aligned in identifying, why this would be important, and then also setting a strong set of evaluation criteria questions with that team before you dive into really understanding the providers that you might be considering. So really starting with who are my people, really working with them to identify what are the questions that we want to identify, as we're looking at providers, and the why behind the project itself. And really, I would say document your process out. A lot of that I think is really compelling as you're thinking about creating a business case for senior level leaders, if that's important as a part of the process, and help you really outline documentation that you can present to your leaders. And also, we really involved user feedback and new hire feedback too in that process, as we were working on this. So we knew that we were getting feedback from new hires that were looking for a more streamlined experience, and a lot of times that information and data can really aid in projects like this too, and the why of implementing tools that will help streamline some of those tasks that you might be doing manually right now too.
That's great. So, we have a lot of questions coming in. I love it. I'm going to go ahead and kind of pepper in some follow-ups. So, Amy asks, what was the biggest ask internally when looking at a solution like this? Was it time saved? Was it money? Or was it just really about streamlining the business and employee experience?
Yeah, definitely. For us, it was really looking at, we were scaling really quickly. And so we needed to create solutions that would save us time internally. So that was important. And then really, again, streamlining those business processes. So I think the pieces that we did end up measuring in terms of our metrics of success, we did see just the amount of not just time saved in terms of how many tasks we were able to automate. We automated over 98% of our pre-boarding tasks, and that included all the tasks from across the different stakeholder groups. So that was really impressive. And then we calculated how much money was saved if you were to look at that in terms of people hours. So even though that wasn't the initial metric of money saved, but it was something that was an added benefit to our goals of streamlining the business process and saving time. So.
Great. Joshua asks, can we share a specific story of an internal stakeholder, either at Udemy or my experience of having this aha moment at the power of automation with data? What were they able to do now based on time freed up or data uncovered?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I feel like with onboarding, such a big piece of it is your IT systems, and working closely with IT. And, our IT team, we didn't add extra headcount to our IT team early in the year. And so we were scaling and onboarding to such a big degree, but we didn't have, as many people coming on board in our IT teams to, prep laptops and get all the needs ready for applications and different things like that for our new hires. And I know it was really hard for them initially because they wanted to be, thinking about bigger picture ways to scale the business or work on projects that would give them more time, but they just didn't have it. And so there was a lot of back and forth between our teams trying to figure out, laptop addresses. I mean, like really minutia little things. Like somebody didn't do their laptops, the recruiters would tell me. We would try to get it from IT. IT didn't have it in time. It was this internal sort of mess of communications. And we had a lot of strategies that we tried to make it easier for us. But that was just a really small task that we were able to easily automate using data. So the first thing a new hire does, they get a welcome communications and then a task to fill out their laptop forms. And then the automated reminders were such a crucial piece of the puzzle. So, our IT team easily had everything they needed right when they were doing their, laptop prep instead of having to go back and track down people, track down hires, include recruiters, include me. And so that was something that they, it's like those small things, but they just completely appreciated it. And we don't have as many meetings with IT even anymore just because everything's running super smoothly. So, yeah.
Great. I'll share one personally that I often see is that a lot of times people are there's someone whose job it is to look at a matrix of spreadsheet and then add someone to a whole bunch of different calendar invites and different Slack channels based off of different data in their profile. Um, and I hear from people whoever that job was before, I often hear them say, I used to have to get up and spend 4 hours copying and pasting and having moments where I maybe mess that up, put someone on the wrong channel, whatever it is. And then they now log in and they just go, oh, it's done. It's just there. And that's always this moment where something it felt like magic, like couldn't deliver. And then you have it happen. And you're like, wow, I have like a whole half day where I can do other things now. So that's another story that I would love to share. I love giving that back too, right? You kind of alluded to this, Lauren, that you get to work on things that have really measurable impact now instead of so much administration, and that brings me so much joy hearing that. I'm going to
Yeah,
come back to
absolutely.
the questions. We have one last question in there. I'm going to come back to it and just we'll kind of work through some of our other questions that we were going to cover. So how have the results been since switching to automating?
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I know the question earlier of just time saved or costs for the business, things like that. And with the automations, we were really able to automate, over 90% of those onboarding tasks and really saving hundreds of hours across the teams, and about 150,000 just in admin costs alone. And those kinds of numbers really allow us to give us a lot more time back for things again that we, as a learning program manager, a big part of my role is thinking about the learning outcomes of our new hires. It's less, the transactional pieces are important and we have to get those things done, but it's really the broader experience and what they're really learning and how we design really strong learning programs here internally is of utmost importance as a learning organization. And again, we ran culture amp surveys for week 1 and day 30, and we've received pretty consistent feedback overall on our onboarding. But we also know from data that onboarding, satisfaction can be pretty low generally, right? I think new users could feel like they move through content really quickly or don't have a centralized place to really understand what needs to be done and when, or really setting up a new hire to understand what the expectation is, for their first week or their first 30 days. And so we we've received a lot of great feedback around new hires feeling like they're able to get the things done that they need to get done, that they have those easy checklists. And with managers internally, we also ran a 3-day survey after the managers go through the data experience as well. So one of the things that we really love about the tool is that you can have supporting actors within it as well. So I know for onboarding, for example, our managers want to have more understanding and transparency on what they're doing in company onboarding, or we need to get information from our managers about, any sort of new hire technology needs, or we want to empower and enable our managers with great templates for 30, 60, 90-day plans, things like that. So we've been able to offer more resources, not just asks for managers, but also resources out to them that helps empower their role-specific onboarding design and learning. So because of the automations, it just makes it really easy to set up communications, get them synced with the right resources, make sure they're receiving those in Slack, things like that. So overall, we've gotten really great scores in our manager feedback. And then if we've asked managers if they want to schedule short calls with myself or Kelsey, who also works on onboarding. And those calls are also great as we're able to hop on and learn more about their experiences in onboarding really directly. And that then informs changes that we want to make or other resources or tools that our managers across the business can really leverage to make onboarding even more successful for our new hires.
That's great. That's really great. Managers are historically a hard audience to please.
Yeah, the task completion is typically lower than our new hires, which makes sense. But we've also been able to look at that, right, within data. What are the tasks that are not being completed at the same degree as other tasks? And can we make little tweaks and changes? And we've been able to see results from doing that as well. So even little things like moving the automations, or a reminder to Slack versus email. We're a pretty Slack heavy culture here. So it allows us to see the broader picture of a lot of different hires and a lot of different managers, what their experience is looking like, and we're able to gather real-time feedback from them. And so all of those things have just been incredibly beneficial for us.
It's great. This kind of agile HR, you're like really living the dream.
Yeah, definitely. And then reinvesting in our live sessions, which also it's like I think oftentimes with automation, it's really important to automate those tasks that are, that don't need a person necessarily to do them, but then ramp up the pieces that'll really make the onboarding experience very human centered, right? Whether it's being able to greet your new hires or having a live IT session, or be able to really, to run additional learning games, or things that'll just make the experience even more exciting for them as they're coming on to their organization. So yeah.
Fantastic. So I want to circle back around to Joseph's question. Where did you see the biggest experience win when implementing a new tool, implementing tooling in the new joiner experience?
The biggest win.
Yeah, the experience win. And so I think likely, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I really love is just the ability to create new content within the experience. So, having like a day one welcome that really outlines their orientation and what to expect. We have, our CEO doing a welcome on there as well. We've implemented, some new ideas for our managers too, just to get them excited for their new hire starts. Um, and in general, I think it just makes it really easy that all the, calendar automations just automatically happen for the new hires. So it's all like clockwork within the system, and everything that we set in terms of expectations just happens automatically. So getting them into their onboarding sessions easily, sending out those welcomes. We've been able to we have different global offices, and having our different global teams welcoming those specific people in those regional areas. So I think we've been able to really drill down and make it more special, depending on not just welcoming people to the company, but also if they're joining our Dublin office or our Turkey office, things like that. So there's lots more ideas that we're excited to implement, but those are just some initial ones.
Great. So we have a couple, I have one last question, and then I'm going to move over to some questions that were emailed into us from people who couldn't join. So how can others do what you've done?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think a big piece is just don't be intimidated and talk to your leaders about it. If you're seeing a need, it's important that you can go out and find ways to make this a little bit more streamlined, and be able to use an employee experience tool to do that. Um, I think recognizing that it's not going to all happen overnight. The process for us took some time, but it's definitely worth it. A year later, I can't speak more highly for the experience that we're having internally for our new hires and for our new hires themselves. And I think really, keep iterating with not only, getting buy-in, but also the tool itself. We've found that, we've been able to be really creative with ways that we think about onboarding by using it. Um, and ultimately, I think this is really about people coming into your business and having a more human-centered experience, giving time back to your stakeholder groups to focus more on employee learning, or ways to really show your company culture. And I think a good question to always ask too, especially your stakeholder groups, is what would you be able to do if these things left your plate? What would be the important things that you'd want to do next? And it's really interesting to get responses from people in what they share, and that can really help drive the business case and the work around things like this.
Oh, smart. What a great question. I'm going to steal that. Please add any more questions you have to the Q&A. We have a couple that I wanted to address. Big shout out to Toby, who sent us quite a few of these. So Toby asked us, how does the process relieve anxiety for new starters? How does it help them be part of culture and community? And then we'll move on to some of his other questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so real that, people feel anxious on their first day, or heading into a new role. I know all of us could probably relate to that in many ways. The feeling of anxiety, but also excitement for a new position. And I think it's important that we can do whatever we can to relieve stress and anxiety from our new hires. And so, having clarity of the expectations, having clear checklists and actions is such a important place to start so that a new hire can know, okay, I've completed these things. And we get feedback all the time that checking things off in a checklist is gold, right? It's so simple, but it's so important. And I think it really helps people stay organized in the work that they're doing. Um, and I think in terms of the culture and community is really, I think one thing we love is again the communication automations and really personalizing those to the new hires. They're all, really directed towards them. We can update for different offices. And then really when we think about culture and how we introduce that to our new hires, we're doing that in a lot of different ways, starting from the pre-boarding phase all the way through to their first 30 days. So for us, earnestly authentic and always learning our core values. And, every step of the way, our new hires are getting, personalized welcomes and people reaching out and bringing them into the company and really, wanting to get to know them in many ways. So, I think a lot of those things are important. And then also, I think creating consistency across the business and especially Udemy, we're a global business, and so making sure that there's some things that are really consistent, and having some of these automations really helps us do that more effectively.
Great. So another question from Toby was, how flexible is it so that everybody can have a different, who has different onboarding needs, and comes in with different, say, skills or levels, is able to get the things that they need?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And one thing that I really love about using this particular tool and using data is that you can get really granular in terms of, let's say managers versus ICs or fixed term versus, full-time employees. You can delineate those things within the experience paths. So we can say, we want to target these specific audiences and they're going to get a different set of communications or a different learning module, or our managers are going to be put into our manager training program, things like that. So onboarding can become pretty complex when you start to look at employee types and different levels, and executive level onboarding, things like that. So there's a lot of directions that you can start to go. And I think using a tool like Data allows that to happen much more quickly. Kelsey on our team just worked on a brief project even this last quarter. We have fixed term hires that convert to full time, right? And there's not a lot of them, but we still want them to feel like that's an acknowledgement and that we're making sure that we check the boxes of them getting, important information about their benefits or learning what's different now that I'm a full-time hire. What are the new perks and benefits I might receive? Getting training on what our level set and OKR processes look like, because now they'll be doing some of those things. So it allows, I think, the tool for us to go even deeper into making those experiences even more, specified in what those people might receive. So I think those are some of the ways that we've really, I think we have more ways to grow there, but that's one of the things that data really offers us that I really love.
Yeah. One of the other things I've seen that's happened for you is that you've become almost like a mini consultant within the organization, helping different departments develop their own
Yeah.
department onboardings. Do you want to speak a little to that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's important to note, as a learning program manager for onboarding, it's like, you might only have we all have a certain amount of time. And there's so many projects I always want to work on. And one of the things that I love getting excited about is just the departmental onboardings or the role specific onboardings and how we can better enable our managers and support them because they just have so much on their plates. And, doing onboarding and creating great onboarding plans takes time and effort. And, it's such high value when it's done well. Um, but, we've been able to work with our sales enablement teams have now implemented data for their role specific onboarding. We've been able to really work even more closely with them to look at what our new hires receiving in pre-boarding. And then they have now created experiences once the new hire begins and starts their onboarding training program. So they've been able to use data, to communicate with their managers about what sales training they're getting, all sorts of things that they're really excited about and loving. And we're also starting to work with our PDE teams and offer, data as another option for role-specific onboarding as well. So that's been really fun just to be able to enable other teams to make their roles a little bit easier and think more creatively about how to continue the experience as they move out their first 30 days.
That's great. So we have just a couple minutes left, 3 specifically. So if there's any last questions anyone wants to put in, otherwise, I'll give you a minute. But for everyone attending and everybody watching this, Lauren would love to connect with you all on LinkedIn. I will, so you can find her, Lauren Hauser, on, am I pronouncing your last name right? I realize I don't ever say it out loud.
Yeah, you did. You got it.
On LinkedIn. And we can also go ahead and share her link to her. I'm a big fan of Lauren, as you can tell. And she's really been able to have such an impact on both the new hires, the managers, and just the larger organization. And I think in general, just highlight the impact that an L&D team can have. And so I would really encourage everyone to connect with her and continue learning from her past this webinar.
Absolutely. Would love to connect and share best practices or ideas. We're always in process, always learning, and excited to continue the dialogue.
Fantastic. So we over at Dado are at dadohr.com. Feel free to reach out to me if you would like to see the tool in action. I'm always happy to give a demo, and excited to continue to dive into this topic in future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.